Hello everybody, today we're renaming the channel. It's no longer JayEmm Friends, instead apparently it's Jimmy No Mates. And in today's video I'm going to be giving you 5 simple tips for those thinking of doing a little bit of car YouTube for themselves. Over on the main channel, I have done a number of videos talking about some of the filming equipment that I use, the way that I do my edits, and if you haven't seen those and this is something you're thinking of doing or are currently doing, I'll put links to those videos in the description down below. Before we get started, one really important thing to say is that with content creation of all sorts, there isn't really a right or wrong answer. Instead, what I'm going to be giving you today are my ways of doing things and the justification for why I believe they are the right decision. So, we're going to start off with something that I think is fairly uncontroversial, which is get good sound. It's really easy, particularly for myself as an ex-cinematographer, to get obsessed with pictures, lenses, cameras, funky shots, all that sort of stuff. But the simple fact is that if you can't hear me, you're going to turn the video off. Now, some of you, statistics tell me, are watching this on a nice big TV complete with THX certified surround sound, and that's lovely. But a much larger number of you are watching this on a mobile device of some sort, either a tablet or a phone. And it's for those people in particular, you need to make sure that your sound is nice and clear. To get good sound quality, you don't need to spend masses of money, but a couple £100 on a good quality Rode or Sennheiser setup, most importantly, with one of these little things, a lapel mic, means you should get fairly decent, consistent sound. No matter where you're stood, where the camera is, it will be nice and even. Point number 2, and this is quite important, you have to make sure that your framing is different. What am I talking about? Well, a lot of people will do stuff like this, talking to camera, and then they'll change the angle a little bit, like this. And this feels weird because your brain knows that things have changed, but not enough things have changed or in a big enough way for you to be distracted by them. Instead, you simply notice all of the things that now no longer match up, all of the many continuity errors. And in simple terms, nothing new is presented in this frame you didn't really see in the last one. Instead, when you cut, you want it to be like this. There, wasn't that a much slicker transition? All thanks to the fact that with this shot, we are presenting the viewer with new information, giving your eyes and mind something to be distracted by that essentially masks the fact that we have cut the image. It feels a lot more seamless, doesn't it? It's the same transition, it's just as abrupt as the last one, but it's because of what you're showing that it feels that much smoother. What can I say but you're welcome? A third, and this is a very much personal preference, is your frame rate. Now, I'm a big fan of 25 frames per second. In case you're not actually sure what it is that I'm talking about, frame rate is the basic concept of how many individual pictures make up each second's worth of video, because video itself is just a collection of stills played fast enough that your brain is fooled into thinking it's actually motion. Something called persistence of vision. Cinema is actually played at 24 frames per second, but if you were to try and make YouTube at 24 frames per second, I would call you a moron. And the reasons for that are many, but in short, you're just making your life difficult. The reason I go with 25, and why that's a lot easier, is that in Europe at least, 50 frames per second has been the television standard for as long as we have television. And it's 50 here because it's based on the refresh rate of our power grid, which is 50 Hertz. In the USA, meanwhile, they have 60 Hertz as a refresh rate, and that's one of the reasons that 60 frames per second is so popular. Most frustratingly, in order to actually be able to make my point in a way that hopefully is easy to see, I have had to release this entire video in 50 frames per second, despite the fact that most of what you've seen is in 25. I think the best material to actually illustrate the difference is a drive-by shot, because it features a lot of motion. Here is one of my regular ones shot at 25 frames a second. And now here is another, but shot at 50 frames per second. I'm sure the difference is obvious. The 50 frames per second is a lot smoother. It appears a lot clearer just by virtue of having more frames in it. The reason I don't like it? Simple. I think to most people, 50 frames looks more like television, and I've always wanted my stuff to look a little bit more like film. point number 4, and this relates explicitly to when you're out and about and have attached cameras to the side of a car. It may sound counterintuitive, but I recommend that you turn image stabilization off. A lot of people tend to be a bit confused when I tell them that, because they think, well, the camera's going on a car, the car's wobbly, we want the image smooth, so surely you want as much image stabilization as you can get your hands on. Well, no, because image stabilization is a fairly dumb thing. All it's ever trying to do is keep your picture pointed in the same direction. When you've got your camera rigidly, or near enough, mounted to a car, the car and camera are always going to move in unison. So in frame, the car should always be in the same place. However, the camera doesn't know it's mounted to a car. The camera's only ever trying to point the same way. So if you've got image stabilization on, the car will bob and weave up and down in the frame. And today's audio interruption comes in the form of a glider getting a tow. Actually, I did have a humorous moment earlier. I heard the sounds of a jet going over, looked up and saw one of his friends in a glider, and I thought, crikey, that one's making a lot of noise. Now, the one thing I should do is point out that there are certainly times where you definitely do want image stabilization, and for me, it's the main camera inside the car which is trying to shoot me. The reason for this being that often, because of the way things are mounted, the camera's always going to have a little bit of shake going on. Certain cars, particularly convertibles, are quite harsh, and so I think it's best just to leave image stabilization on. In that case, get a smoother picture. But that's a little top tip from me that hopefully a lot of people might now go out and try and maybe improve their footage. Fifth and final is another dead simple one. When it comes to the edits, be your own harshest critic. Be absolutely brutal. Avoid repetition and hesitation. Don't leave in anything you don't need to. And on that note,